Hello, you incredible and amazing friends. Thank you for joining us on this LinkedIn live stream experience. And I'm with amazing Brad Strydom. How are you today, Brad? And what is going on in your world?
Ed, fantastic, and thank you very much for having me on your live. I appreciate it. It's we're doing well, yeah. It's still sunny here in Adelaide, so a good end to the day. It's beautiful. At least we've got some sun at the moment.
There you go. It's pitch black where I am right now in wonderful Sydney, and so good to have you with us. And Brad, I was just going to ask you, right? You've been a fitness guy for a long time. We've known each other for years, and you are taking the local fitness area by storm. Tell us about fitness in your wonderful city of Adelaide and beyond. What are some of the fitness trends, and what are some of the cool things that you're seeing out there?
Ed, the fitness industry here is actually, when I first came over, because we've obviously just arrived from South Africa, so we've been here 2 years now, but I was blown away about the amount of fitness facilities there are in Adelaide. It seems to be a big trend here, and there's lots of different offerings as well. So you've got everything from CrossFit gyms to functional fitness facilities. You've got Globo gyms, which seem to be on every doorstep. So it seems it's a big business here, the fitness industry, and you see them cropping up all the time. So I don't know if Adelaide's always been like this or if it's set for growth in terms of its expansion. So there's always room for growth within the fitness industry, but it's definitely a good space to be.
Yeah, well, interesting. Adelaide, being a veteran myself, Adelaide's become a real, as you would know, a real military sort of government sort of place, right? You get a lot of military, a lot of government, a lot of super creepy secret stuff that we're not allowed to talk about, of course. It all happens in Adelaide, so you guys do all the cool stuff, right? But I was just going to say, right? I was just going to say with all that, you've worked with a lot of people since you've been in Australia. You've absolutely kicked butt. Tell us about some of the challenges that people encounter on their fitness and health journey. So let's take it back to the beginning. When someone starts with you, where are they at and what are some of their challenges that they're experiencing?
Ed, that's a brilliant question. I find there's almost two parts to it. So you get the individuals that obviously are already within the health and fitness industry. And when I say that is they possibly could be gym goers already. So that's number one. Number two is you get the people that are doing nothing. So they possibly sedentary, they're not exercising, they're not doing anything. So there's kind of two camps, really. I find the camp that is already moving and they're already doing things, I think that's fantastic. You know, that ball's already rolling. But certainly within that space, there's still boxes that they could tick as well. And I think exercise is one of the easier components. And when I say it's one of the easier components, is that it's easy to get dressed and go to the gym, for one. The hardest part is actually changing your lifestyle behind the scenes. So when we look at the big picture, when I say I'm going to use the generalist word of holistic, when you look at the big picture, there's a lot of boxes that aren't ticked. And from working with clients for the last several years and having I owned a gym back in South Africa for 8 years, I've had a lot of touch points with different individuals. And it's like I said, it's easy to go to the gym 3 times a week and train for an hour. But what happens in all those other hours when you're not in the gym? And that's what, that's the important part. So we look at diet, we look at the stress, we look at the amount of water people consume, we look at how much sleep they're getting. And often those are as important components as opposed to just the fitness. So for the gym goer, yes, I love it. I think it's amazing. They're moving that big rock of exercising. But on the other hand, then they could be focusing on the bigger picture, little deeper parts. The people that aren't doing anything, that are sitting home and sedentary, those are the people that I really try and bring into the program and get them moving, because that's an important thing. And I always find, it's probably why, because there's so many gyms, that they're not competing against each other. They're competing against McDonald's, they're competing against the couch. So not direct opposition, but rather to lifestyle habits.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. One of the biggest, one of the worst things I do with my health, and I've done this a bit lately, so I'm just being honest here, is committing the evil crime of eating after 8 p.m. I know I shouldn't do it, right? I've broken down. I've been sitting at my desk at 10 o'clock at night, snacking on a bowl of potato chips. I know everyone watching, I'm going to receive international condemnation for that, right? I was going to ask you, I find, and it's funny when I speak to a lot of people, one of the biggest sins is what we do after 8 p.m. It's that late night snacking and eating. And I've spoken to a lot of people. I'm not the only one who suffers from this, right? I'm usually pretty good, but I've dropped the ball a bit lately, just being honest with you. Tell us about late night snacking. And by the way, we've got Mike Carlton with us. Say a big hello to Mike Carlton from Facebook. We love you, Mike. He's an old friend of mine. And I was just going to say, if you've just tuned in, smash that like, smash that share, leave a comment. Please say hello and connect with Brad. Yeah, I want to ask you about late night snacking. Why do we do it? How do we form those habits, and how can we stop us? Tell us all about late night snacking, Brad.
Lovely question, Ed. Lovely question. I think that's that's a trap that's easy fallen into. And like I said, exercise is one thing. Let's bury that for the moment. When we're dealing with people, and I think we live in a stressful environment, there's lots of factors within our lives. So I think there's a compounding effect when people have been through the day, they've had lots on the go, they get home, and often the food that takes place after hours is often from a trigger that possibly happened during the day. Whether that trigger is stress, whether that trigger is purely to wind down, I deserve this kind of setup.
Yeah.
And you know, some people have a vice. I mean, that's something that they've been doing for a long time and they enjoy it. The problem is that if it's done late at night, we're not conscious and we're not aware of it, it's very easy to overindulge. So if you open up a slab of chocolate, for example, your ability to keep discipline to only having one block is very, very slim. So it's more likely you're probably going to eat half the slab of the chocolate or possibly the whole thing and then have to deal with it the following day.
Yeah. So you're saying, and this is what I find, that I'm not perfect. I'm hardly perfect at this, right? Obviously you're the pro and I'm not. But what I find is that, at least for me, I find setting rules. Like, for example, it's 8:00 our time in Sydney. And I said to myself, I ate a bit beforehand. I'm not going to eat any more once I finish this live, right? But I want to ask you, let's say half an hour later, we finish the live and we had a great live. And thanks to all our fans, by the way, for tuning in. What if I start feeling the urge to go to the fridge? I start feeling those compulsions. Now, I was going to ask you, in that moment of sin, debauchery, and temptation, how do I break that cycle? How do I interrupt myself to stop myself committing, fridge suicide?
I love it. That's a great question, and I think it's a common problem. One of the things is, I think when we become mindful of these things, so if you've tapped into your ability to be mindful of these certain things that happen and these patterns, and these certain triggers that have kind of led to this point, when we become mindful, and often when we're tracking to some degree to track our behaviors, that's one way we can do it. The second thing is that if I say to you, go and have a massive glass of water, okay, go and drink water before you make that decision. That could certainly be one little, I'll call it a hack, because that's just going to kind of put a stopper in place before you go to the fridge and have something else, or go to the cupboard and get that box of biscuits lying in the back. So a massive thing of water for one. And if you've got anything else in the house, whether it's a fruit or if you've got a salad or anything like that, sometimes it may not be the sweet that you're looking for. You might just be looking for something to eat. So if you can hack that system and have a glass of water or have some fruit or have some vegetables, you're probably not going to want anything after that.
It's funny, a little hack I found lately, and shout out to our German friends at Aldi, right? And you'll be proud of me, right? Unfortunately, I did get a piece of coconut stuck in my throat before the interview, which was really bad, right? But Aldi have these protein balls that are fantastic, right? They have these it's like cocoa and berry protein balls. And if I have one or two of these, they're just little, right? They're just quite small, like large grape size. If I have one or two of these protein balls, I'm done. I find it, I can either have one or two little protein balls or I can eat a whole block of chocolate. So I found this lesser evil. What's your take on the whole protein ball thing? I think they've been amazing.
Yeah, I think they're handy. And I think if they're used strategically, I think they can be helpful. Often the consistency of those things, they use a date in there, which will be naturally high in sugar. So they'll use a date as the binding agent. And then they'll use a source of protein in there, possibly a soy or a whey protein. Often it's more so soy. So I think what's the lesser of two evils here? Sure, it's not the perfect timing to have it. But I mean, I think if you've got it available and you're probably going to eat that instead of having a slab of chocolate or having a box of Tim Tams, then I think you might. There we go. Is that Yep, there's the packet of.
That's it. Lassie's in
There
front
we
of
go.
me, and she just
There we
handed it to
go.
me. This is doing a sales plug for our German friends at Aldi. There you go.
There we go.
These things have been the nuclear missile to stop me from eating too much late at night. So there you go.
I think that's amazing. I think one of the things that we've got to be careful of, and I see there's a lot in there, is are you able to control having one or two, or is it a bit of a glutton fest?
I don't know, probably. Look, there is a degree of sin, debauchery, and gluttony. I will confess to that. But what I'm saying is, it's not as bad as just attacking the Aldi block of chocolate. So I suppose, do you want a few protein balls, or do you want to attack the chocolate? Because it's funny, I actually tested the theory beforehand. Just before I jumped on, I had 2 protein balls, and I find it sort of kills the hunger because I'm trying. My biggest problem, to be honest with you, my biggest dietary problem is what I do after 8 p.m. That's my whole problem. It's all during the day, whatever. And it's funny, not just me. When I speak, at least 90% of people I spoke to, everyone's screwing themselves after 8 p.m. Everyone's doing the same thing, and so I'm like, I got to solve this problem myself before I can sit on the soapbox and pretend to be awesome, which I'm not.
You know what's an interesting take on that? It is, and it's something that I do, and I often encourage with my clients as well, is to possibly have a whey protein shake in the evening if they want, or any source of protein. And the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of the clients that I work with, when I come to clients, I'm referring to people that are either within the gym industry already training, or if they clients that are coming from a sedentary background, is that more often than not, the vast majority of people undereat on protein. So usually that is kind of like a filler towards the end of the day. So if in doubt, have more protein. So yeah, that's a good hack as well.
And we got Ol Bolts with us. Good seeing you, Ol. We love you. Now I was going to ask you, and I've been doing this a bit lately. Cans of tuna, right?
Yep.
They're cheap. They taste good. A few times, if I felt hungry, I've just had like a little can of tuna, and that just feels wonderful. What do you think of the whole can of tuna thing? Is that a good way to find off the late night snacking?
Yeah, I think that's a good option, Ed. Honestly, I think a can of tuna in brine, as opposed to in brine, instead of vegetable oil. I think that would be the answer. Or the alternative would be tuna in olive oil, which would be a better option. My only concern is possibly overdoing it, and I think maybe from a health perspective is there's lots of tinned food is not always the best option. If you eat too much of it, the BPA inside of the tins as well. So just from a health perspective, that's the lining inside the tin. So maybe not too much. Don't overdo it. But I think if you're strategically using tuna as a snack, I think it's 100% perfect.
Excellent. Now we've got our friend Mike Carlton with us. Mike Carlton's an old friend of mine from years ago in Sydney. And he makes a great point, Mike from Facebook. I'm currently on the man shake, which replaces my dinner something light before sleep. So there we go. Mike has crossed the Rubicon now. We're talking about protein shakes. We're talking about weight loss bars. Tell us what you think about protein shakes, meal replacements, and weight loss bars. What's your take there, Brad?
I think they're very, very handy. I think they fill a deficit, and when I say fill a deficit, they fill a deficit in terms of protein. Probably the most important macronutrients or food group people should be eating. And so that's often a good filler to fill up things. It's convenient, it's practical to have. And like Mike says, you can have it at the end of the day as well. One thing I would say, though, is that it should never be there to replace normal food. So normal food, whole food that's from the earth should be number one priority. They call it a supplement because it supplements the diet already as opposed to being the foundation of the diet. My only thought is that when it comes to shakes and so forth or meal replacements is that it shouldn't be something that, fair enough, if you're going through a phase of losing weight and you're going through a process, that's one thing, but it should never be something that's done long term. So you've got to learn how to be able to, prepare your own meals, eat whole food, because ultimately that's going to be the best meal. Something straight from nature as opposed to processed. And when I say processed, a protein shake is a perfectly good example of it being a good option, but it shouldn't be the foundation of things. So, yeah.
Oh, Brilliant, brilliant. Now, moving on, right? One thing is, and as in the time that you've known me, I used to be very slim a few years ago. Then I got really fat during lockdowns, and now I'm starting to look like I don't look like you yet, but hopefully in about 6 months or so, maybe like you. One of the things that I found fascinating is that, and this is your advice too, which is fantastic. One of the things is I've gotten my steps up, so I do at least 10,000 steps a day, right? On average, I do probably do at least 12,000 steps a day. So I found just by getting the steps up has been amazing for weight loss and improving my health. And Mike says, thank you. We love you, Mike Carlton.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
by the
Mike.
way, for those listening, please smash that like, share, and comment. If you've got any questions, put them up and I'll read them out. Now, tell us about the whole step thing. Steps have been fantastic for me. Tell us about the whole step thing and how that works.
Yeah, super. That's a great question, Ed. I think I'm going to dive deep on this one. There's a thing called the TDEE, which is the total daily energy expenditure chart. So it's basically broken down into 4 layers. And if you look at the layers, there's the thermic effect of food, which is how much energy is required to break down the food. That's number 1. Then you get a thing called NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And ultimately, that's what you're talking about when you're saying the step count. And then you get the basal metabolic rate, and this is what the energy required from your body, whether it's breathing, speaking, and that's energy I'm expending. And then you get exercise. But when you look at that total chart, NEAT plays the biggest part in terms of burning calories. So NEAT is what you're referring to. It's the actual walking and the actual moving. So when people say that I'm exercising, and I always like to use this analogy, if you had to take a corporate banker sitting at his desk the whole day, like sedentary, at his desk the whole day, and then 3 times a week he goes to the gym and he trains for an hour. Okay, that's example number 1. Example number 2, if you have a farmer who's active all day but doesn't exercise, okay, who's in a better position? The farmer who doesn't exercise, who's active all day, or the banker who sits at his desk who only trains 3 times a week for an hour? Okay, so when it comes to total energy expenditure, which you're referring to your step count, that's where it is, and that's the bigger factor when it comes to burning calories as opposed to exercise alone. So I think you make a very valid point. Like, so you could be in a position where you're walking a lot, but you might not be exercising, but you might be doing more justice to your body than going to the gym for 45 minutes for 3 days a week, for example, if you're covering 12,000 steps a day. If that makes sense.
As well was interesting, and we got Zachary Anago with us. Great seeing you, Zachary. We got MD Wazim. Welcome, everyone. If you just come in, smash that like, share, and comment. Connect with Brad, and welcome from Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We're streaming everywhere. It's awesome. Now it's interesting actually because what was interesting about my whole lockdown experience. Yes, I put on weight, but I was also working out a lot of the time as well. So I was a bit fat, but I looked more like a wrestler. So in other words, if you saw me during lockdown, it's not like, Ed, you're fat, what happened to you? It wasn't like I was blubbery. I was like a wrestler, basically. I looked like, a lot of people said, Ed, it looks like you're going to beat me up. You're like all muscly. And I was like muscly and huge. I'm like a rugby player, right? I'm like a rugby player.
Yeah.
I wasn't like fat, so to speak, right? And interestingly, I think you're right because I was doing a lot of weights, but I wasn't doing the actual steps. And what I found was I was big as in fat and muscly, but I did put on a lot of weight. It wasn't until I got my steps up that I was able to actually drop a lot of that fat. So I was going to say, and it's interesting actually, this is credit to Samsung. So on Samsung Health, so using a Samsung phone, what Samsung Health does is it compares your average number of steps to people in your wage range, in your step range.
Yes.
And what was scary about, so I'm 44, right? Oh God, I'm almost 50. I'm 44, right? And almost 50. And what was interesting is that I'm walking like, let's say 12,000 steps a day.
Yeah.
For average, people who are 44 were doing, according to Samsung, were doing 4,500 steps a day.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like 4,500 steps is just me walking to the shops and back. It's like nothing. I thought, is that the reason why there's so many health issues out there? Because people just aren't doing the steps. Is that a fair reaction, Brad?
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one, Ed. I think it's common. I think we live in a world of convenience and practicality. And these are little things like for example, you'll go to the shops and there'll be a parking lot. Everybody tries to look for the parking lot that's directly outside the front of the door. As opposed to, driving where there's no cars. You can't park sandwich between two other cars and they can bump your door. Drive to the open lots where there's no cars parked. At least no one's going to bump your car, and then you can walk in the shop. So I think for a lot of people, I think we live in this world where things are around convenience. They need to be fast. They need to be instant gratification. So, ordering home cooking, people sit at home, they order their food, they order their veggies. If they do go to the shops, they're closest to the shops. Instead of taking the stairs, they take the escalator or take the elevator. So I don't think it's sometimes intentional. I just think people think that that's a more practical answer. It gets them faster, But what it's doing is it's making people more sedentary. It really is. So.
Now, one thing I never bought into, right? There's a few things I never bought into. You know how things happen around you, and you just think they're stupid. You don't buy into it. You don't support it. You just think they're dumb, right? And by the way, caveat here, I take no pleasure in people losing their jobs, right? So big caveat number one, and to anyone losing their jobs, I absolutely feel for them, and I'm against that. I want everyone to be employed. However, it comes down to a lot of like Deliveroo, for example. Deliveroo, the
yes.
door-to-door company, right?
Yep.
They're pulling out of Australia. They announced that. And also, too, I think you've got a lot of the other companies as well are announcing staffing cuts, right? Now, again, I don't find that funny. I'm not here to gloat on that. So, again, I don't like people losing work. But the bit that I find fascinating is it looks like the whole food to your door fad is unwinding, right? Like it seemed to really, obviously it took off during lockdown for lockdown reasons, but it seems to be unwinding, right? Well, I never bought into this whole buy your food and have it delivered to you. Like if I want to get a pizza, I want to go to the shops. I want to order the pizza. I want to wait for it. And I want to make sure it's not screwed up, right? I never bought into this whole delivering food to the door fad. First question one is, do you think it's a fad? I mean, it's definitely the industry is retracing. What do you think of this whole get your food delivered to your door thing? Like, I just never bought into it, and I think it's stupid.
No, I agree. I think you're different, Ed, and I think there's a lot of people that still take advantage of those delivery services. I mean, the amount of times that I've sat at a restaurant and watched the back door in particular, open and close for Uber Eats. And I don't know the details behind Deliveroo and as to why they pulled out, but there's a lot of opposition out there as well within that space. And I think Uber Eats has been very, very competitive in that space. I know a few people that do Uber Eats, and I don't know if that's been a competitor within the game that's kind of shifted things, but I see it often. I think it's still I don't think it's going anywhere. I honestly don't think it's going anywhere. I think if anything, it's I might be wrong, but I think people like convenience. I think if they're at home, maybe you're different in many regards. Maybe we don't always know these things, but I think it's still a utilized service without a doubt.
Yeah, and Mike Carlton says currently using HelloFresh and loving it, and just a distinction I want to draw there. I think having if you're on a meal plan or you're having online shopping, that's one thing, right? But it's getting takeaway food by delivery that I've always thought. I don't know about that. Like, I guess I'm just different. I just never bought into it. But it looks like I think it must be now that a lot of the lockdowns have ended, people are now not using it as much anymore, so they're going to buy their food again, causing the retracement of those industries.
Could be. But good on Mike for that HelloFresh. Good on him.
Yeah. No, HelloFresh I have a lot of respect for, so we love Mike Carlton, which is amazing. Yeah, fascinating. So I was going to ask you, in fact, funny story. I want to talk to you a bit about overachievement for the moment. Now, one of my wonderful friends, a great guy, you'd like him, by the way, he was going to the gym 5 times a week, and he actually lost a lot of weight. Credit to him. Did this intense plan to go to the gym 5 times a week. I spoke to him the other day, and he's not going to the gym anymore. Right, and I actually told him about my friend Brad Strydom from Adelaide and all that. And I said, look, if I spoke to Brad will probably be the sort of guy saying, look, just go to the gym once a week. Going to the gym once a week is better than 0 times a week. So I was trying to channel you and sort of falsely quote you, right? The bit that's interesting, and a funny story I told him, and it's a bit of a funny, amusing story. About 20 years ago, I was working at this company, And I started going to the gym once or twice a week, right? Just getting my health right. I was still dealing with PTSD, so I'm trying to like get over my PTSD and all that, right? And there was this lady at work that was a very, I hate to say it, she was a bit of a Karen, okay? The term Karen wasn't around then, but if it was, you would, by today's standards, she is like the ultimate Karen, right? Ultimate Karen. And she was going to the gym 5 times a week, and she would openly make fun of me to my face, saying, Ed, I go to the gym sometimes 7 days a week. And basically, she just rub it in my face and call me a loser for only going once or twice a week, right? Then what happened was, you like this bit of the story. You know where the story is going, of course, Brad. Then what happened was about 2 or 3 years later, I moved. I got a cool promotion at another company, moved on from that toxic place. Anyway, I was just walking down the street. I think I was eating like a sandwich or something, like a Subway or whatever. And I just bumped into her, and she was massive, right? She was like huge, right? And I didn't say anything, but just my reaction, I didn't say anything. My reaction of like just freaked her out. Like I didn't say anything. I wasn't being mean to her. I'm not that sort of person, but just my reaction to her freaked her out. And to her credit, she actually just turned around and she actually apologized. She goes, "Look, Ed, I'm sorry I made fun of you in those days. I probably shouldn't have done that." And she said, "Oh, Ed, I hurt my knee at the gym and I stopped going, and here I am." And to her credit, she did apologize to me. So I withdraw my Karen statements. A true Karen would never apologize, right? So in all fairness to her, right? What do you think of that whole overachievement thing, right? I'm sure you've seen it 1,000,001 times.
Yeah. I have, Ed. I think people get addicted to fitness. And that's a common thing. I think sometimes that replaces something else. If I have to unpack all of that, because there's a lot of parts to it, but I think one of them is being addicted to fitness, so that replaces something else in their life, and that becomes their void, that thing that keeps them sane in their minds. And it's very easy to overdo it, and I see it in the gym. I see people, doing double sessions. You'll come in the morning and come in the evening. Certain individuals are built for that stuff. Certain individuals aren't. But, you walk in a very fine line. And I always like to use the analogy. If you take a piece of wire and you bend it only a few times, a couple times a week, that piece of wire will last a long time. But if you bend that wire all the time, it's eventually going to break. Okay. So that's a good analogy there. And I think, we've brushed on this before in the past. It's long-term consistency is the ultimate goal. And there's a great quote. It says, "He who trains the longest is the strongest." So ultimately, if you can just chip away a little bit here and there, the goal is, it doesn't matter if you can deadlift 300 kilos now. Can you do X amount of weight when you're 60 and 70 and 80? That's more important. Doesn't matter what you can do now.
Yeah. No, fascinating. I was going to ask you as well, Brad. I was going to ask you, what are some of now to those listening around the world, if you've just come in, please like, share, and comment. And to those watching the recording, thank you. To those, now this is aimed at people who are listening who are they're unhealthy, they're not happy, they're at the start of their fitness journey. They may have been fit for a long time but fell off the wagon. To those who are really sort of stuck at the start of their fitness journey, what do you say to them to sort of get started and live a healthier and fitter life?
Lovely question, Ed. And I think that's a struggle that many, many, many people have. I kind of regard myself in the kind of the behavior change space, just because I think changing people's behaviors or changing their own behaviors once they've been stuck in a rut, been doing things for a long time, it can be a challenge to get out of that routine that they're in. And because obviously they've got other things impacting their lives. They've got, commitments to work, commitments to family, kids. There's a whole bunch of things to get involved. But to simplify the process, I always try and encourage people, you got to, if we have to go deep, you got to have a plan, etc. and so forth. But if this was a simple conversation, I was giving plain, simple advice, I would say the lowest hanging fruit, or what's the biggest rock that you can do that's going to make the biggest amount of impact. And sometimes, for some people, a catalyst might be going to the gym, for example. All right. So, and sometimes it only starts with one workout. One workout will make a big impact. And there's a great author, his name's James Clear, and I read an article about his some while back, and he was talking about how there was this guy that went to the gym for 5 minutes a day. So all he did is he got in his car, he went to the gym, and he was there for only 5 minutes. And then he went home. And all he was trying to do was he was trying to build the habit of being consistent in showing up to the gym. And that's all he was doing. And when we start that process, where we become consistent in that process, that's going to become a habit. And then once he's been there for 5 minutes, now you can increase the time. So I always like to use the word habit stacking, is that we're going to start with one particular habit, and then you're just going to layer it onto the next thing. So take small steps first, because more often than when people try and change where they are in terms of their health and wellness, they try and do everything all at once. They say, no, I'm going to start training 6 times a week. No, I'm going to eat clean. I'm going to clean my house out, and I'm going to start doing this and this and this. Then they start, and then it doesn't work out, and then they fail, and then they go, oh, gosh, it must be me. It must be me, you know? But when they start small, it allows them to get wins. And when they get wins, there's a thing called self-efficacy, which is going to give them the confidence to keep going. So that's how I would approach it. Just make sure that you just do one thing at a time.
Yeah. On a funny note, and Mike Carlton, we love you, Mike Carlton. Great guy, says it's all about routine here. I'm just saying this more for comedic effect. When I was 19, I joined the army, as you do, right? As you do, right? So I joined the army, and I remember I actually was at about 12 weeks. But when I got accepted into the army, I had about 12 weeks to get ready for it. They actually put me on a food and a training plan. So I was actually fairly fit by the time I arrived for my basic training. So I was okay. Interestingly, though, I remember there were people that did no training. In other words, they rocked up on basic training without doing any training. And I remember this exercise. You know how you got those big logs? You know how you got a car park, right? And you have like there's 2 little logs, and you have that big circular log, right? We'd actually throw them around every morning. Like you do sort of bicep curls with them. You hold them above your head. You know what I mean, right? You do those.
Yeah.
And I remember I had muscles aching in me that I never thought I had, right? I was actually quite fit at the time, right? I remember some people after day 3, they literally couldn't move. Like they literally could not. It would hurt them to hold a phone above their head. They were in that just from all that muscle strain. And I thought it was absolutely hilarious, right? In hindsight, absolutely hilarious. And I was going to ask you, right? I think that's what happens. I think what happens is some people, they start off at 0, they go hard into it, and their body just hits a wall after a week, and they stop. Am I sort of reading that correctly, Brad?
No, you 100%, Ed. You're 100%, and I think it's kind of the all or nothing approach. And instead of doing the all or nothing approach, just often I think people are sold the idea of quick fixes. Okay. Where they want the quick fix. So if they're going really, really hard, they want results and they want out. But if you said to someone, it's kind of like saying, listen, I'll get you 6-pack abs in 6 weeks. But you've got to do this and 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 this. Or if I said, I'll give you 6-pack abs in 2 years, but we're going to slowly get there. People are going to buy the 6-week option as opposed to the 2-year option. So I think, again, I'm going back to that instant gratification mindset where people want things now. They want it to happen now. Pick up the phone, get my takeouts, etc. So instant gratification can take over sometimes. And I think you're right. People go too hard at the gate.
Yeah. There you go. And we got Kevin Effington with us, and he says habit stacking is a game changer. It's funny talking about habit stacking. I know we're talking fitness. So I'm using a non-fitness example. From a sales point of view, actually, and you would know my story. About 6 months ago, I said to myself, I'm going to reach out to 20 people a day, right? I now reach out to over 100 people every day.
Yeah, we see. Yeah.
So if you said to me 6 months ago, Ed, in 6 months, you're going to be reaching out to over 100 people a day, I'd sort of look at you strangely, right? Now I do it every day. Like I easily reach out, unless I'm traveling, I easily reach out to at least 100 people a day, right? And surprise, that my business is growing. So it's funny that I love that term habit stacking. You just start with something small, you get used to it. And the same thing, I guess, from my LinkedIn business networking point of view, the same thing works in that regard too.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's an interesting point, Ed. I can imagine if your previous self said to you, listen, you need to contact 100 people a day.
I'd be like,
You
now I
would
just do
never
it
go.
normally.
So the fact that you started out with 20 and then, it became 25 and then it became 30 and then it became 40, you slowly, incrementally gave yourself enough confidence to continue going to 100.
Yeah. Well, I've already reached out to 60 people a day. Once we finish this, I'm going to go reach out to another 50 people on my PC. Easy, right? Easy.
Yeah.
Now, Brad, I got to say big thank you. Thank you for joining us. And to all our fans watching, like, share, comment. Brad, I just want you to give you an ending monologue. Please give some monologue with some closing thoughts, and also tell us of what programs you have. And I guess people from around the world can hire you. How can people hire you and get started with you?
Yep. Well, it was absolutely lovely speaking to you. I think the world of health and fitness is a fantastic place. Some people just don't know how valuable it is in their lives. So, whether you're couch potato, start moving. Whether you're someone that's going already, just make sure you keep moving and just keep moving those big rocks. From my side, my website is Brad Strydom, so my name and surname.com.au. I work one-on-one with my clients, and ultimately I am a health and fitness coach. So I make sure that people regain their health, lose weight, and then build the correct habits along the way. So it's all very well getting us from A to B, but I help people getting from A to B and then from B to C to D and so forth. So it's a lifestyle change completely, as opposed to just a 6-week program.
Gotcha. And of course, as well, you take clients from across the world, don't you?
Absolutely. It is all online.
There you go. Pleasure. We've got Cullen Haynes with us. Cullen, we love you. He's an absolute fitness legend, Cullen. So
He's
we
a
love
great
you.
man.
No, pleasure. I just want to say a big thank you. Appreciate it. And Brad, a big thank you to our fans for watching. We love you and appreciate you. Brad, do you want to give a closing thought before I hit the end broadcast button?
Last one, Ed. I think, and I have closed on something like this before, is the importance of gratitude. And I express massive gratitude to you. And like you said, I express massive gratitude for the people that have tuned into this video. That's the number one thing, and it counts towards your health as well. So that's the shortcut to happiness.
Oh, well said. Brad, we love you. Everyone, thank you so much. Bye all. Keep up the winning, everyone.